trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. Hope you had a wonderful weekend, and we're certainly looking forward to these last 2 days of 2024. A little bit later, we'll talk about some of our fundraising, which has gone very well. As a matter of fact, might just say that those of you that tend to wait to the very last day, you might not want to, because we still have a match on the table, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But we've been able to reach quite a bit of it, and so that is still available and will be. But I thought we would spend the first hour here talking with a good friend, Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, an individual that has been and is the executive director of the American Constitutional Conservative Rights Union, individual that served in Congress on the 22nd District there in the state of Florida, also is currently the chairman of the Dallas County Republican Party and author of a number of books, including one we've talked about, Guardian of the Republic. But Colonel West, just great to see you.
Kerby, it's great to be here, and I want to tell you something maybe you don't realize that this is our 10th anniversary from the first time I came into your studio in December of 2014.
10 years. 10 years. Hard to believe. Yes, and that was a previous studio, like you said. Mm-hmm. So we've actually moved studios and all the rest, and I'm glad you kept track of that, because that is very significant. I might just mention we've got a number of his pieces here we're going to talk about. When in Charge, Be in Charge. A little bit later, we're going to talk about Les Mis. Hard to believe that one, but nevertheless. And The False Gods of Leftism. 3 very good articles by Alan West, all on the website right now at pointofview.net. Before we get to those, of course, we have the passing of the 39th President of the United States, Jimmy Carter. You grew up in Georgia, so I'm sure you have at least a few things to say about the man who was your governor and then your president. Yeah,
it was interesting because driving down to see, the old folks, you had to go through Plains, Georgia, and it was a real interesting thing to drive through. Here's the birthplace of our governor and also our president, and so you have to honor him, remember him for being a graduate from the United States Naval Academy, being a submariner, and all of those things. There were some issues, of course, with his presidency, but I think that when you look at him past his presidency, how he continued to show that decent side, that humanitarian side. No one will ever forget Habitats for Humanity and the things that he did. I think that that's his legacy, and that's what we'll remember him for.
Yes. And, of course, we could talk about all the questions about foreign policy and all the rest, and, of course, we recognize those too, but I just wanted to get at least a comment from a man in Georgia, and I won't ask you about Tennessee football, but, again,
Hey, look, the worst thing that could have happened to Tennessee was Michigan beating Ohio State. I mean, when I saw it, it's like, oh, my God. And all the bad press that Ohio State got, you knew they were going to make an example of Tennessee, and they absolutely did. I mean, it was hard to watch, that first quarter.
As a matter of fact, tomorrow I was going to talk with Kelly Shackelford a little bit about football because, they got this playoff system, and so far those 4 games that were played about a week ago, which weren't even close.
They were horrible.
So, either we have too many people in the playoff system or there is a decided home field advantage, maybe both, but we'll see what the rest of these look like, because I know you like to watch football like I do.
Well, Kerby, one of the things that there's just too many bowl games now.
Yeah, well, that's true.
It's too many bowl games, and the other thing is that this shouldn't be a participation trophy type of thing. Okay, back in the day, you knew it really came down to 4 bowl games: the Rose Bowl, the Orange Bowl, Cotton Bowl, Sugar Bowl, and those were the best teams. The 8 best teams were going to play there, and that's where your national champion was going to come out of. But now all of this foolishness, I mean, college playoff, home field advantage, whatever, just have some simple bowl games. The other thing I don't like is this opt-out thing
Yes.
Where all of a sudden,
You don't have to play, yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to play, or this transfer portal. We now have free agency in college football. And so we just need to get back to the basics.
We need to. And again, if you are even doubting that, as you read through some of these articles, you will see that a couple of times you mentioned Tennessee football and a variety of Rocky Talk. But anyway, let's get into it, because you have put together a series here. But the first one I know you wanted to talk about, the Roman poet Virgil. Fortune favors the bold. We're going to say it in Italian or Latin or any other language.
Fortuna adiuvat.
Adiuvat, yes, right. And again, the point you're making is simply this. This has been a very decided election. I've got in front of you there something that Donald Trump posted just a few minutes ago, but before he even endorsed Mike Johnson as Speaker of the House, he goes through all of this. And so we've, as you said, for 4 years witnessed what happens when you allow the left to have in power. And I think we now know it wasn't always Joe Biden who was actually making those decisions. And you can see what it has left us with. And that's why you have such a remarkable series of statements being made by, first of all, the swing states went for Donald Trump. The popular vote went for Donald Trump. And, of course, it will be next Monday actually ratified that the Electoral College went for Donald Trump. And that, in some respects, is not only for Donald Trump, but against this last 4 years. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know when was the last time we saw that trifecta alignment for a Republican president, and that's an incredible mandate. And if you have never sat down and looked at the breakdown of the by county electoral map from 2024, it sends a clear message about what this country has said as far as the direction it wants to go with constitutional conservative policies, economic policies, energy policies, national security, foreign policy, border policies. So I think it's so important now that Republicans don't blow it like they did back when Trump 45 came in, and they had the House, they had the Senate. You had Paul Ryan as the Speaker, you had Mitch McConnell in the Senate, and they couldn't get anything done. And the next thing you know, that first midterm election, they lost the House and the Senate, and that really stymied what Trump was able to do. So it's so important now that you take this mandate. You got the wind at your back, and you have to crush this progressive socialist ideology here in America. They are running around much the same as when the angels smitten the people in Sodom and Gomorrah, and they were running around blind, couldn't see. That's where they are. They have no leadership or anything, and now you got to exploit the mandate that the American people have given to you.
They don't seem to be getting the message, because if I read you correctly, you're pointing out the fact that the leftists are actually wanting to double down, quadruple down, and hire DEI government officials. You would think that when you lose, you'd say, okay, maybe some self-reflection. Maybe we didn't say some things or do some things we should have done. But I'm not noticing that from those individuals who have been promoting this leftist agenda.
No, you're not. There are only two people on the left side. You know who I'm about to say. James Carville, the Raging Cajun, and Van Jones.
Van Jones. Yeah.
Those are the only two voices of sanity that are, and Bill Maher a little bit. I mean, he's kind of gone off on the left.
Yeah.
But other than that, they're still saying that, Kerby, you're stupid.
Yeah.
You just didn't get it. The economy was going fine. Gas prices were not that bad. The border was secure. There's peace all over the world. You just didn't get it. You couldn't see it. You're just too dumb to understand. That's the elitist mentality. And so if they continue to, double down, triple down, quadruple down, they will go into political exile. And so this is a great opportunity for Republicans and conservatives at this time.
Going to take a break, and when we come back, I want to continue on this for a little bit, because you talk about one of the big questions: why are Republicans so reticent and recalcitrant in advancing the constitutional conservative legislative agenda and means of governing? I want to get your thoughts about that and a couple of other issues, and maybe just go back and revisit this idea of how significant this election was, because after all, you are still the chairman of the Dallas County Republican Party. I've noticed that you've had Republican judges elected.
Yeah.
You had a mayor here in Dallas that went from being a Democrat to a Republican. So I want to talk about some of that too. All that coming up with Colonel Allen West right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
As the year of 2024 winds down, I predict the year of 2025 will be different. There is reason to believe that the political landscape will be different in the U.S. due to the election of Donald Trump. But there is growing evidence that the political change here will also be felt in other countries due to the rise of populism. But I also predict that the economic landscape will be different. Earlier this month, I talked about the desire by some members of Congress to build a Bitcoin strategic reserve. And Trump has already been exploring the possibility of issuing an executive order to create a Bitcoin reserve. Other countries have noticed. Sarah Naffo is the European MP from France. She recently gave a speech in front of the European Parliament. The quotes I'm using here have been translated into English using AI. She began by giving a brief history about how one country has successfully used Bitcoin and then asked these questions. Bitcoin is skyrocketing, and what about the European Union? What is the European Union doing? It's squandering our money on unbelievable waste. It continues to accumulate tragically inflationary deficits. She then suggested that it is time to change the paradigm. She says it's time to protect our people from inflation and the poor economic choices of our states. It's time to say no to the totalitarian temptations of the European Central Bank, which wants to impose a fully controlled digital euro. Instead, she argues, it's time to bet on freedom. It's time for our states to invest in Bitcoin to build national strategic reserves. I would suggest to you that a speech like this wouldn't have been given 6 months ago in front of the European Parliament. We may be seeing an entirely new economic paradigm in the year 2025. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free booklet on a biblical view of Patriot Preachers, go to viewpoints.info/Patriot Preachers. Viewpoints.info/Patriot Preachers. You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Alan West in studio with us first hour today, and I'm just so excited to actually not only have a chance for you to hear from him, but also we've posted 3 of his commentaries that appear in Town Hall and other places. And just before we get back to this, I just mentioned as we were going to a break, in Dallas, you have seen some remarkable changes because the argument usually has been red state, blue state, not as much red city, red suburbs, I should say, blue cities. And so the argument always has been, well, you can't make an inroad into the cities. And yet here in the state of Texas, I can see both in Fort Worth and now in Dallas that there are some very significant inroads. And I mentioned one, the fact that you were able to elect some Republican judges. And then, lo and behold, the individual who ran as a Democrat as the mayor of Dallas even then becomes a Republican, then appears at the Republican convention and writes this incredible editorial in the Wall Street Journal. So something's happening here.
Yeah, I had a great conversation with Mayor Eric Johnson, and we talked about some things we could do to get a more friendly city council for him, especially some of the things recent revelations. But, you know, the playbook of the left has always been to come in a red state and take over a major urban population center. But the thing is that where do you find the greatest amount of failures of leftism? In major urban population centers. And so what I think happened in this election cycle, it wasn't so much about going and talking about party. It was going out and talking about issues, talking about principles. Everyone wants safety and security. Everyone wants to be able to go and afford groceries. Everyone wants to be able to fill up their gas tank. Everyone wants to have better education opportunities for their kids, better economic opportunities in their communities. And that is how I think that we will break through and we make a difference. And think about what you saw. You saw young black men. I mean, when Barack Obama has to come down and scold black men and shake his finger at them, I mean, that was the worst thing could have happened. And then all of a sudden you saw what the results were. Young black men saying, we don't have to follow this path. We want something different. We want something better. Yeah. So I think the way forward is to talk about the issues, talk about how you can resolve these things, talk about the policies. Look at the T-shirts that they're wearing in Chicago now. Flip Chicago red.
Yes.
Who would have ever thought that?
Never would have guessed that.
Absolutely.
And again, as you point out, there are at least a few voices that are saying, guys, if we don't turn this around, we really are going to be on the outs for the future. Mm-hmm. So really, this article isn't so much about what has happened to the other side. It's that you are still concerned that Republicans oftentimes are very reticent about advancing a constitutional conservative legislative agenda. And so why is that, and what needs to change?
Well, I think so often they worry about what's going to be written about them in the Washington Post, New York Times, LA Times. Who cares? The thing that needs to happen going forward, you need to align government with the Constitution. In Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, it lists the 18-some-odd duties, responsibilities, enumerated powers of the federal government. They reside within the legislative body. That's what they need to get back to. We opened up talking about Jimmy Carter. Let's think about it. 2 agencies that Jimmy Carter created during his presidency. Number one, Department of Education, unconstitutional. Show me where the federal government has a constitutional duty with education. The other one was Department of Energy. He created Department of Energy to make us energy independent because of the Saudi oil embargo. We were not energy independent until the Trump administration came in and made sure that we were energy independent through policies. So let's look at those 2 agencies right off and say they don't align with anything constitutional. Why do we have them? Maybe we can have an Office of Energy. Maybe we can have an Office of Education. But education is something that is at the state and the local level, which brings you back to the 10th Amendment. All of those things not designated, not delegated to the federal government, are reserved to the states and to the people. So really, we need to look at restoring federalism, that idea of what is in the purview of the federal government, all else is in the purview of the states, and let's restore that relationship.
And again, those are the enumerated powers. But DOJ isn't necessarily looking at that, although they may bring us back to that because Elon Musk, maybe Vivek Ramaswamy are thinking about it constitutionally, but they are simply saying we could take $1 trillion out of the federal budget and nobody would miss it. And you're a former member of Congress. I think you can agree with that.
Absolutely, I agree with that. Why should my taxpayer dollars be going to some South American country for transgender shows, drag queen shows? I mean, show me the Constitution where, that's a duty and responsibility. Or even it's something as simple as college student loan debt. That is not an enumerated power of the federal government.
One of the things that you mentioned in your piece, because I do recommend it, first of all, they read through it, they're probably going to smile a few times, maybe even laugh out loud, is you say, okay, if you want to know what this idea of boldness looks like, fortune favors the bold, you pick out an individual by the name of Tom Homan. Oh, yeah. And boy, I have seen him go on various talk shows. For anybody that's not familiar, we've talked about him many times. He is kind of the real border czar, not the pretend border czar, but the real border czar. He fears neither God nor man. I mean, he comes on and just tells it like it is, and you think, is a very good role model for what needs to take place.
Absolutely. Look, he goes on CNN, MSNBC, wherever, and he doesn't change. He doesn't adjust his message. He speaks truth, and he speaks it with boldness. And, it says, be strong and of good courage. That's what it said that God told Joshua. And Joshua went out, and he was strong, and he was of good courage, and the children of Israel were rewarded with the promised land. That's what we need to have. Not people that, you can say this on CNN or you can say this with this commentator. No, you go and you have your agenda. You have your plan that you're going to go and execute, and you say this is what we're going to do and this is why. Because the left is always bold. I mean, what have we seen in the last 4 years? They don't care what anybody thinks, but then that's why they lost.
Yes. Well, and there was a previous president who said elections have consequences, and maybe they could learn a lesson from that.
Yeah, he told Republicans to get to the back of the bus, didn't he? The Barack Hussein Obama.
That's amazing. Speaking of this, there are some things that are going to be lessons for those who should be bold, and the first is there's going to be a pushback, obviously, once that first bus or plane ride of individuals who are being deported heads out. And yet the American people so far on almost all the surveys support that. So Tom Holman really provides you with a model of, I know you're going to fuss about it, but we're going to do what is right for the nation as a whole, and certainly something is supported by the American people.
Think about this. You have some close to 600,000 criminal illegal immigrants in this country.
Right.
30,000 of them murderers and rapists known. That's where you start. Now, who's going to argue with that? Who's going to say, oh, let's not send the rapists and the criminals and the murderers back? And then you have some 1.5 million gotaways. And the numbers that I'm throwing out here, the active duty end strength of the United States Army is just 425,000. You've got more criminal illegal immigrants in this country than your active duty Army.
Well said.
The size of the United States
Yes.
Marine Corps is 182,000, and you're telling me that we cannot get rid of that number of criminal illegal immigrants, and to include the fact that we know there's some 30 to 35,000 single military age male Chinese running around in this country. Xi Jinping did not allow single military age male Chinese to just up and leave with tens of thousands of dollars. Okay, why are they here? So that's the priority. This is not about going around finding grandma who's, cooking some tortillas or something like that. No, we're talking about hardened criminals, male or female, because there are some pretty bad female actors that are out here as well that are trafficking young women. And we're sitting here in Dallas, Texas. We're in the top 5 for sex trafficking in the country. So, yes, at Trinidad, the Venezuelan gang, right here in Dallas, Texas.
Well, again, you mentioned China, and I might just mention that our February issue on Outlook is on China and all the things happening here and all the threats and all the rest. And just before we go to a break, I just think I might mention that one of the benefits of supporting Point of View is that you receive my booklets if you are giving at the level of $1 a day, $30 a month. But if you also are a donor, you receive, of course, the Outlook magazine, and we certainly have been addressing many of those issues. The most recent one, just about ready to go out, talks about what should be the agenda for 2025. The one after that is one on China, things we're talking about here. And we have a banner here that says, Give the Gift of Truth. So far, we have whittled away most of the matching challenge. I think we're down to $16,000,
Come on,
if you
folks.
can believe it.
Look,
so there's not much
16,000.
left. We have, it was 125,000, and now we're down to a very small amount. So I would suggest that if you've been thinking about giving and you'd like to have a match, you better give today, because I can't guarantee it'll be there tomorrow.
Well, the thing, Kerby, what you are doing is such an incredible service, because the body of Christ has to be better informed, better educated, and better activated. What we saw happen in the past 4 years in the United States of America was an abomination, and it should not happen. Christians have to stand up, and what you are doing is an incredible work for the body of Christ. And people, you've got to support Point of View. And when I think about 10 years ago when I first showed up in your other studio, and now look at where you are, this is what the donations go to. It's not about going to help Kerby buy a new car, okay, and put it in his yard. It's about making sure that we do the Lord's work and making sure the body of Christ can stand up and be strong.
Colonel Alan West, again, if you'd like to give us a call, that's 800-347-5151. Of course, you can go to the website, pointofview.net. Be right back.
Did you know that Christians account for 70% of all philanthropy in America? Let this be a reminder that your generosity matters, and it especially matters for Point of View listeners right now. In this chaotic and godless culture, Americans need a voice of biblical clarity. And when you support Point of View, you're keeping that voice of clarity on the air for generations to come. And by the way, any gift you give in December will be doubled, but there are only a few days left to take advantage of this special matching challenge. So please, give right now. Remember, your generosity matters. You can bring clarity to the current chaos with your donation today. Give online at pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net. Or you can call us toll-free at 1-800-347-5151. Again, that's pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Colonel Alan West in studio with us today. And just as we were going to a break, I did mention the fact that we still have the matching challenge, although we've been able to whittle away quite a bit of it. So for those of you that wait to the last day, this is the second of the last day, and it may eventually, we might even run out of the match. So if you are waiting, I would encourage you not to wait any longer. That number, 800-347-5151. Of course, you can simply go to the website, pointofview.net. There's a banner that says Give Now. And Colonel West, when you ask people to give, you're asking them to do what you've done. The first time I think you were ever here, you said, here's my credit card.
Yep. And I'll do that before I'll head out of here because this is so important for me. And look, I don't want to see the left triumph in a voice and a platform like Point of View going away because you sit back and you think about remember the movie Star Wars and what was the next one? The Empire Strikes Back. The left is going to hit us back again. You know, when you attack and you take the high ground, you have to first prepare for the counterattack. And we need to solidify this platform because we don't want all of a sudden the next thing you know, it's gone. And we're out there in the darkness once again. So we want to make sure that Point of View is there to provide that biblical perspective on these issues that's irrefutable. Truth is a beautiful thing, and you do such a great job of conveying it, Kerby.
Well, I appreciate that. Let me, if I can, get to a second article by Alan West, and this is where Dr. Angela, your wife, talked you into going to watch Les Mis.
I don't think she talked. She just gave me the look.
Yeah, well, you know that. And needless to say, after 3 hours of the show, I felt miserable, you said, but it was a metaphor for something I think you want to talk about, and that is the idea that oftentimes people on the left are not only miserable, but they have this nanny state kind of mindset that says, well, I don't want a firearm, you shouldn't have a firearm either. I don't think we should eat hamburgers, so you shouldn't eat hamburgers either.
You
and you go through this
gulp.
long list of all the things that actually they don't want you to do because they don't want to be happy. They don't want you to be happy either.
It's the equal sharing of misery. That's how Winston Churchill defined socialism. And why would we want to be in that state? And you and I were talking off the air about it. When you turn over to some of these shows, I mean, there's no smiles. There's no happiness. I mean, it's just constant ranting. And now what do you see happening? Their ratings are just falling because who wants to tune in and just be miserable, looking at some of these shows? And even Bill Maher, God bless his heart, I mean, he adds some levity to it. He's a bit of a comedian. But you're right. Okay, if you don't want to eat a hamburger, that's fine. That's your choice. You have free will. I like Five Guys, okay? And I want to have my 2 patties with cheese. If you don't want to go out and get a big gulp, don't go out and get a big gulp. Every now and then I want to have a sugar upload, from 7-Eleven. But it is as if they're saying that you do not have the right to be able to decide what type of car you can drive, what type of appliance you can have in your home, how much toilet water you can flush. We want to be in control of every aspect of your life. And that's not the American way. And I think, again, this is what people rejected.
And I think it also relates back to your boldness article that you wrote just more recently, because there is always this push in Congress to have another regulation, another kind of policy. And it seems to me that not only do we have in Congress individuals who sometimes don't stand up and fight, they're quite willing to delegate that to unelected bureaucrats.
Yes.
And that's a big issue because, as you've pointed out before, even if you can change all the people in the cabinet that Donald Trump is bringing in, you go down 4, 5, 6 layers.
Yes.
There is a deep state. And that's not just a conspiracy theory, is it?
No, it's not a conspiracy theory. And you and I were talking, I call them the government ticks. They just stick into you. They just gorge yourself. And we've got to eradicate that. And so when I think about what has to happen is that, again, you've got to go in with a definitive mindset, a definitive plan, a definitive way that you're going to realign government. And you've got to take away this belief that government is this supreme overarching thing that dictates how everyone should live their lives. You go back and you read Frederick Bastiat, The Law. The Law. 3 things that the government...
Glad you quoted that.
Yeah, 3 things. They're supposed to protect your life. They're supposed to protect your liberty. They're supposed to protect your property. That's it. and all these other extraneous things. This is misplaced philanthropy and really is legal plunder. That's what Bastiat called it. And that's why I think that these folks are so miserable, and that if they can't get their way and dominate and controlling their lives, they go into an apoplectic rage, and that's where you see them at right now. I mean, women going out shaving their heads. I mean, this is just gone insane.
Well, and the other one that you bring up here is that all of a sudden, Make America Healthy Again has been criticized.
It's fat shaming.
What?
Yeah, you
don't even want people healthy?
You don't even want people healthy. Out in San Francisco, they just hired this government bureaucrat that's going to be in charge of fatness, I guess. I mean, she's saying we have the right to be fat. So in other words, we have the right to be unhealthy. See, this is the amazing thing. They create this thing called the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act, which has nothing to do with health care.
Yeah.
It has everything to do with controlling health care. It has everything to do with, taking away our ability to have choices. But they don't want us to make the choice to be healthy. They don't want to incentivize healthy living. That's what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is talking about. Mm-hmm. And again, they would rather you be sick so they can come in and say that now we have to take over this thing because you're not smart enough to understand how to take care of yourself.
One day when I sort of lost any kind of rationality, I decided to sit down and read the Affordable Care Act, which as a member of Congress, you know how long that was.
Yes.
And I actually lived to tell about it. But I was struck, Colonel West, how many times it said, as the Secretary of Health and Human Services shall determine. Mm-hmm. In other words, the individuals that sat down and drafted this didn't even have enough specificity that Congress could give it an up or down vote. They just said, we'll just delegate all of that to the Department of Health and Human Services.
We have to pass the bill in order to find out what's in the bill.
That's the other line.
The famous words of Nancy Pelosi.
That's right.
But that is what we have to get away from. And so this is an incredible moment in the life cycle of this country. Remember, in this next 2 years, 250th anniversary of this nation. Mm-hmm. Next year is the 250th anniversary of the battles of Lexington and Concord.
Yes.
Think about that mentality. Think about what was going on here in this nation, that we didn't want to live under rule. We wanted to be governed. So we have got the opportunity to flip that coin once again and getting back to being governed, and being governed by people that, they want us to have our pursuit of happiness, not pursuit of misery.
Well, while you're talking about Lexington and Concord, for a man who served in the Army, whether we get Pete Hegseth as the Secretary of Defense or someone else, they need to address the issue of wokeism in the military, don't they?
Absolutely. I mean, right now we have a military that they can define their personal pronouns, I guess, pretty well. And we've got these cross-dressing, recruiters and things, but our recruiting and retention levels are down. When you look at what has happened in China, China is matching us and even surpassing us in some ways in the maritime capability and capacity,
right.
especially.
That's our February article. We document all
there
that.
You go.
Yes.
And so, there's a new commander-in-chief. But again, we have got to get rid of these generals. See, a lot of people don't understand, Kerby, is that 2-star, 3-star, and 4-star generals, these are political appointments. Mm-hmm. You're not going in front of a board or what have you. And so a lot of these generals will align themselves with whatever the political wind is so they can get promoted. So you've got to clean house in the military. And for those people saying, well, you really can't do that, Barack Obama cleaned out 197 generals in 6 years, got rid of them.
That's right.
So it can be done. I mean, the only title in the Constitution that relates to the president is Commander-in-Chief in Article 2. That's the only other title he has or she has. And so we have got to have a person that's focused on getting our military back to its core competencies and capabilities to fight, deploy, to win. That's it. Colin Powell said the military is about breaking stuff and killing people.
That's right. Well, and again, one of the things, back to your boldness, if you think about this, Barack Obama not only got rid of a lot of generals, he also got rid of a number of appointees, and he also, for a while, was even labeled by some of the liberal critics as the deporter-in-chief. Mm-hmm. So it seems to me that if you want to find another model of a president who was able to do some things with boldness, I think you actually have that with Barack Obama on the other side.
You absolutely do. And a lot of the he was turning people around at the border instead of really allowing ICE to do what they're doing. But we've got to get back again This is a sovereign nation. This is a constitutional republic. We have borders that have to be protected. If you don't protect your borders, you're not a sovereign nation. So I don't see how anybody, these mayors and these governors on the left, saying, well, over my dead body, or you got to go through me. You really going to tell me you want to protect criminal and illegal immigrants over protecting American citizens? I mean, tell that to the parents of Lake and Raleigh.
Yes. Well, Tom Homan is another model that we talked about in just a minute. And when we come back, I thought we'd get to one other of your articles that came out earlier this month, but it was the false gods of leftism. And it's interesting. We were talking about on Friday with Kelly Shackelford that we had a nativity scene in front of the Capitol. Things are changing.
They are
aren't
changing.
They? And so, again, we'll talk about the 10 Commandments, separation of church and state, some of those issues with Colonel Alan West. We'll take a break. Be back with more right after this.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, Alan West with us for a few more minutes, and I want to point out our third column by him, The False Gods of Leftism, in which you're really arguing that, in a sense, leftism is a religion. A while back, I gave a speech in a number of different venues around the country, which I called woke theology. And what I meant by that is, for people that are secular, ideologies and have secular mindset, it is like a religion for them. But then also the woke ideas have made their way into the various churches, and so that's become woke theology as well. But you point out that the first two commandments, thou shalt have no other gods before me, thou shalt not make unto thee a graven image. And of course, there have been all these people that have told us that we cannot have government and religion together. There's a separation of church and state, but you take that on, but then remind us, since you are a member of Congress at one point, that if you look over the speaker's head, you see one face. It's the face of Moses and the Ten Commandments.
You know, when you're there in the House of Representatives, the people's house, all the great quote-unquote lawgivers of the world, they're all side face. There's only one face that looks directly at the president, directly at the speaker, and that's the face of Moses. So this whole thing about we can't have the Ten Commandments in our schools, we can't. Why would you not want to teach your kids the basis of law in Western civilization, which is the Ten Commandments? Why would you not want our kids to know, this great lawgiver who looks upon the president of the United States of America when he's giving a State of Union address? And so what has happened is that the left has created government with the little g, instead of recognizing God with the big G. And that's what they're trying to replace. And so all of a sudden, God with the big G is not smart enough to have gotten Adam and Eve right, male and female right. He just couldn't get it right. And so therefore now you can go out and you can be your own God with a little g, and you can make yourself into whatever image that you want. You're not made in the image of God. You're made in whatever image you want. And this is what we're going to push. That's part of their religion. That's part of the altar that they worship at. And I think it comes back to what we've been talking about throughout this hour. They worship government. They have created these false gods of leftism, and it's the climate change, it's the same-sex marriage, it's the transgenderism, it's the murdering the unborn babies in the womb, all the way up until the time of birth. They don't understand how beautiful that is, and that children are a gift from God, and blessed be the man that has many of them. They're like arrows in the quiver from Psalms, or I forget what it says in Deuteronomy about, I set before you today this choice, life or death, choose life so that you and your descendants shall live. And if you believe in those things, now we have to come at you, which is really why the Pilgrims left England to come here, because, King Henry set up his own church and made himself the head of that church. Well, leftists are making themselves the head of their own church, and you'll be persecuted and prosecuted. You'll get sent to jail if you stand outside of a clinic that is dismembering unborn babies.
Yes.
That's how crazy it's gotten in this country.
Well, even here in the state of Texas, they wanted to have some curriculum that was covered by the Texas State Board of Education that would allow you to know at least a little bit about the Bible. And that was very controversial. But at the same time, as you point out here, they want to indoctrinate your child on gender dysphoria, DEI, CRT, cultural Marxist agenda, and a variety of other issues. So on the one hand, it's controversial to talk about the origins of our law and the origin of the Christian religion. And on the other hand, we certainly would never allow you to limit whether or not we can teach these kinds of facts about gender dysphoria, transgenderism in the classroom.
Well, think about it. I mean, I think Proverbs 22:6 says, train up a child in the way they should go, so when they grow old, they shall not depart from it. Now you have, government officials saying that, your child does not have to tell you if they are a little boy, but they want to be a little girl. They can go to the school, they can tell the teacher, and the teacher doesn't have to tell the parent. I mean, this is a complete undermining of that structure that God has created, from him down to the family, to the father and to the mother. All of these things they're trying to undermine. And they have been after destroying the family for years. And they've done it so well in the black community where, 25% of little black kids now have a mother and father in the home. So this is what we have to understand. This is why you need point of view, okay? Because they bring these things out to you from a biblical perspective. I mean, because too often we see these things and we don't understand the underlying meaning. God is not smart enough to get the weather right. I mean, now all of a sudden man is control of the weather. Give me a doggone break. But this is how they undermine the omniscience and the omnipotence of God. And why do they want to do that, Kerby? Because if they undermine the authority of God, then who really grants you your life, liberty, and your pursuit of happiness?
That's right.
This whole natural rights theory thing. I mean, this guy, he's not smart enough to get man and woman right. We are. And so we're the ones who will be in charge of your rights. That's the goal, and that's why they have erected these false gods. And that's why they're so apoplectic and they're so crazy about these pillars of government being torn down and being put in some type of right structure that, again, honors natural rights theory to where the government will protect our life, our liberty, and our property.
Well, again, you've seen in other countries, the first thing that a tyrant does is go after the church because we can't have you believe that there is something higher than government,
That's
like
right.
God. And then they go about the families you just mentioned a few minutes ago, because if you can dismantle the family, then government has to be the father and the mother. So
Absolutely.
that's really, in a sense, the two-pronged approach, isn't it?
It is. And going back to Barack Hussein Obama, remember what he said? All of those bitter people out there clinging to their what? To their guns and their religion.
Yeah.
The two things that they hate more than anything else. Your ability to believe in something that is greater than they are, and your ability to defend yourself against something that they want to do. And really, that's how this country got established and started 250 years ago. So, yes, God, family, country, and our ability to protect ourselves. We got to make sure we restore that.
Well, again, I look at these articles here. You seem somewhat optimistic about the future, but part of it gets back to fortune favors the bold. And that's what you're calling for some of the individuals in positions of authority to be bold and to understand that this is a mandate and make a change.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I do have hope for going into 2025. And I just, don't want to see Republicans blow it. They have an innate way of stealing defeat from the jaws of victory. And I don't want to see that happen because God gave us a reprieve in this election cycle. And it is an incredible message that was sent. And think about this. Since 1900, there have only been 5 times. And the last time this happened was 2005. But in this year, after the November 2024 election, Christmas and Hanukkah aligned on the same day.
Isn't that something?
That's one of those signs, I think, from the Lord.
Well, again, if you'd like to contact Alan West, first of all, we even have the Old School Patriot podcast there. So you have that link there as well. We have 3 of his commentaries there, and you can, of course, contact him as well. All of that is available at our website at pointofview.net. And just one last time, I'd love to get your thoughts because we've had a match challenge. It was $125,000. It's down to $16,000. What would you say to some of our listeners?
I would say that, folks, we need Kerby. We need his voice. We need this platform. Please support them. I have just been graced by Point of View over the 10 years that since I moved back here to Texas from Florida. And I just want to thank you for what you do. You are a person that will one day hear these words, "Well done, thy good and faithful servant."
Well, again, thank you so very much, and say hello to your sweet wife,
I will.
who drug you to Les Mis. So still get a
I had to
kick
use
out
it
of
for
that.
something. So.
Yeah, it was certainly worthwhile. All 3 of these commentaries are there, and I would encourage you to read them. We come back, we're going to talk about a couple of other things. A judge blocks Biden from selling off the border wall parts. You knew that was coming. We'll talk about H-1B visas and a variety of other things, and, of course, this battle for Speaker of the House, which I think is going to be resolved on Friday pretty easily, but we will see. This time next week, guess what? It's when they count on January 6th. I think it's going to be a little bit calmer than last January 6th, the Electoral College vote. So we've got a lot more to cover. But again, if you'd like to know more about Colonel Alan West, invite him to come and speak. It's available at our website. Give us a call right now, 800-347-5151. We'll be right back.
Did you know that Christians account for 70% of all philanthropy in America? Let this be a reminder that your generosity matters, and it especially matters for Point of View listeners right now. In this chaotic and godless culture, Americans need a voice of biblical clarity. And when you support Point of View, you're keeping that voice of clarity on the air for generations to come. And by the way, any gift you give in December will be doubled, but there are only a few days left to take advantage of this special matching challenge. So please, give right now. Remember, your generosity matters. You can bring clarity to the current chaos with your donation today. Give online at pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net. Or you can call us toll-free at 1-800-347-5151. Again, that's pointofview.net. pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I do appreciate Point of View and what you folks are doing. You really are doing a great job to educate and to help Christian folks do a better job to honor Christ in all that we do.
My husband and I are your supporters. We just really appreciate the show and the people you bring on.
I just want to commend you guys on your program. I love listening to you. It's a blessing. Been listening to you for several years. Your program has helped my family see current events and elections and politics through the eyes and the principles of Scripture. And that's been enlightening, and we're trying to pass that on to others.
I want to say, first of all, that I really enjoyed the Millennial Roundtable, and I love the program altogether. I think Kerby is great, and I really appreciate all of y'all, all that y'all do, and the truth that y'all put out.
Hey, great show. Love all your comments and what you're talking about.
Thanks again for what you do.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour today, I think you probably appreciated the conversation we had with Lieutenant Colonel Alan West. And now let's, if we can, get into some of the issues in the news, but also let's look ahead in terms of the calendar. Of course, today is the 30th of December. Tomorrow is December 31st. Then we're into the new year 2025. It's not too early to begin to understand a couple of things that need to happen even before Donald Trump takes office. One of those happens on Friday, and that is when you convene Congress and then select your Speaker of the House. Now, there's been some controversy associated with that, not the least of which is not all the Republicans in the House of Representatives have said that they would actually vote for Mike Johnson. And so I think it is significant. I have in front of me here this very long post by Donald Trump, the president-elect, in which he spends a little bit of time talking about being the party of common sense, winning 7 swing states, 312 electoral votes, the popular vote, and then goes through a long reminder of all the things the Democrats did in terms of spending $2.5 billion on a campaign, $11 billion going to Beyonce, $2 billion going to Oprah, and on and on and on. And then eventually said, look, they ran a very expensive sinking ship that also included the DOJ and the FBI weaponization. At the end, then makes the statement it didn't work, but let's not blow this great opportunity which we have been given. The American people need immediate relief from all the destructive policies of the last administration. Speaker Mike Johnson is a good, hardworking, religious man. He will do the right thing. We will continue to win. Mike has my complete and total endorsement. We will see if that makes a difference, but it would certainly make it less contentious on Friday, but we will see. Because if you have another one of these battles over the speaker, you remember the one that actually removed the previous speaker and how they ended up against all odds, Mike Johnson, who I think it would be fair to say is perhaps one of the most conservative, if not the most conservative Speaker of the House we've ever had, then to jettison him because of some of the things that happened, whether or not it was the piece of legislation that was supposed to be 20 pages and ended up being 1,500 pages and all of that. I think if you want to hit the ground running, you really want a Speaker of the House that is elected on Friday, and then you move to next Monday. Next Monday is January 6th. Does that bring back any memory at all? January 6, 2021, of course, was where you had the mob, you had the riots, you had, of course, shooting and all sorts of other things, more than $2 million in damages. And I think we can hope and really believe that this January 6, 2025 will have much less drama. As a matter of fact, as one commentator put it, Donald Trump's victory has made January 6 boring again. Because in the past, when the joint session of Congress would gather together and decide how we were going to elect our president and vice president. Essentially, all they had to do was count the Electoral College votes that came from the 50 different states and territories. And as a result of that controversy was almost non-existent. But let me also say that people tend to look back 4 years. We're going to hear a lot of speeches about that between now and when the votes are counted. But I think it's worth looking back 8 years ago when, at the time, Hillary Clinton had won the popular vote, Donald Trump won the Electoral College vote, and there were a number of prominent Democrats as well as some media personalities that were actually encouraging electors in those states to vote for Hillary Clinton, even though they were supposed to be bound to vote for Donald Trump. Now, that controversy didn't go too far, but it also did highlight in 2016 and when the vote was in 2017, the concern of what is called the faithless elector, because you did have 10 members of the Electoral College who either voted or attempted to vote for a candidate other than the one for whom they were pledged. Now, 3 of those votes were invalidated because many of these states have what are called faithless elector laws. Since then, more have been passed, but you still had 7 individuals who voted not according to what was required of them. In many cases, they voted for someone other than Hillary Clinton. But nevertheless, it did kind of highlight a controversy, and I think just illustrates again that it used to be that the vote or the counting of the votes, the tallying of the votes for the Electoral College would be kind of straightforward and perfunctory. In many cases, even the vote for the speaker was perfunctory. But, of course, we've seen some things that have changed dramatically. So as we sort of look down the road here, we will sort of pay attention to that, but nevertheless, not forget how controversial all of that was 4 years ago on January 6th. But just before we take a break, and when we come back from the break, I do want to have a chance to talk a little bit with our Vice President of Stewardship, that is Jana Weidler. But let me just mention that our first article after the 3 articles by Alan West, so it would really be our 4th article, is this article that actually has a Texas judge which has now blocked Joe Biden from selling border wall parts before Donald Trump takes office. As you may know, there was this bombshell report that came out of the Daily Wire. Again, 3 cheers for some of the things that Ben Shapiro and his team have been doing, in which they were noticing that there were an attempt to take some of these materials to, in the particular case, Tucson, Arizona, and then as a result, actually make them available for auction, so that they were auctioning off some of the materials that I suspect will be used by the incoming Trump administration to complete a section of the wall. And at first, you might remember I reported the fact that this was going to be something, if indeed that auction went forward, would be where the lieutenant governor of the state of Texas said he would actually auction and actually bid for, I guess is a better way to say it, these materials. But now you actually have the U.S. District Judge Drew Tipton, who has a court order which is now prohibiting President Biden from auctioning off the border wall materials before Donald Trump takes office on January 20th. And of course, there is every reason to believe that he and his administration will restart construction of this barrier wall on the southern border, primarily in the state of Texas, although since some of the materials now have made its way to Tucson, maybe some of them will be constructed there in Arizona. So again, not only do you see the particular action being taken by the lieutenant governor of the state of Texas, but then you also have the attorney general of the state of Texas, Ken Paxton's been on the program with us before, who also was trying to stop the sale and certainly applauded the judge for that. So anybody wondering whether or not some of those border wall parts would be up for auction, looks like that has been dealt with because of a ruling that came from a Texas judge, and we will then see a reconstruction of the wall in the future. Let's take a break, though. We'll come back with more right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
As the year of 2024 winds down, I predict the year of 2025 will be different. There is reason to believe that the political landscape will be different in the U.S. due to the election of Donald Trump. But there is growing evidence that the political change here will also be felt in other countries due to the rise of populism. But I also predict that the economic landscape will be different. Earlier this month, I talked about the desire by some members of Congress to build a Bitcoin strategic reserve. And Trump has already been exploring the possibility of issuing an executive order to create a Bitcoin reserve. Other countries have noticed. Sarah Naffo is the European MP from France. She recently gave a speech in front of the European Parliament. The quotes I'm using here have been translated into English using AI. She began by giving a brief history about how one country has successfully used Bitcoin and then asked these questions. Bitcoin is skyrocketing, and what about the European Union? What is the European Union doing? It's squandering our money on unbelievable waste. It continues to accumulate tragically inflationary deficits. She then suggested that it is time to change the paradigm. She says it's time to protect our people from inflation and the poor economic choices of our states. It's time to say no to the totalitarian temptations of the European Central Bank, which wants to impose a fully controlled digital euro. Instead, she argues, it's time to bet on freedom. It's time for our states to invest in Bitcoin to build national strategic reserves. I would suggest to you that a speech like this wouldn't have been given 6 months ago in front of the European Parliament. We may be seeing an entirely new economic paradigm in the year 2025. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free booklet on a biblical view of Patriot Preachers, go to viewpoints.info/Patriot Preachers. Viewpoints.info/Patriot Preachers. You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, let me just, as a program note, mention that next segment, we'll spend a little bit of time talking about this battle between different forces in the Trump administration over H-1B visas. I do want to kind of give you a counterpoint, so I've given you two different articles that you can see. One that believes that what Donald Trump has said is right, others that believe that there needs to be a change. And again, that's a good opportunity for us to see one of those battles that is certainly going to unfold, and we'll talk about it in just a few minutes. Also, there are some individuals that are talking about how the Trump administration can begin to crush what's called the censorship industry, and so we'll get into that as well. So lots of things to cover, but I thought we'd take a break since, as you well know, we are encouraging you to give to Point of View today and tomorrow, the last 2 days of 2024, and so I wanted to get on the line with me the Vice President of Stewardship, Jana Weidler. And Jana, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Kerby. It is so good to be with you.
Well, you've been meeting with a lot of donors and talking to them. And, I think you've gotten a chance to meet some of them. And I think we're really fortunate to have so many people that have been so supportive of Point of View.
We are. We're very fortunate and blessed. We have this amazing ministry, and we are so proud of what we're able to do in getting the truth and biblical views out across this nation. And we meet people all the time that say that this program has changed their lives or affected them in some way, had some kind of wonderful impact on their kids. So yes, being able to be out there and talk to our donors and our partners is such an incredible blessing. And knowing their background and what they're going through helps us serve them better.
Well, and again, I don't know of anybody that probably talks to more of our donors than you by, first of all, face-to-face, because you go out to all of the different events that we've had, but also on the phone. And it seems to me that many times you get a chance to hear from them about why they support Point of View. What do they say?
Yes. Well, Kerby, a lot of them love the booklets and the magazine, and this provides them with the information that they need so that they can witness to others and be comfortable witnessing to others and sharing the truth about things going on in our nation today in their own circle of influence, which is huge. We also are very proud of the fact that our entire staff, we're very prayerful about all the people that donate, all the listeners, and our partners. And it's wonderful to get a phone call every once in a while that they say, "Hey, thank you for praying with me. I want to tell you about how God worked in this situation and give him praise and glory for what he's doing." So that's always the highlight of my day.
Well, again, I think as we've traveled around, you and I together, and also some of the individuals that we both had a chance to talk to, really concerned about the future of this country. And, of course, we talked this last hour with Lieutenant Colonel Alan West about that. So that is certainly the case. And I don't know if you had a chance to hear, but Colonel West really made a very strong case for Point of View. What would you say to our listeners in that regard?
Well, I first want to say this is the second time I've been on the radio after Colonel West, and it's it's not very easy to come on after him. Such an incredible, godly man, and doing so much for furtherment rather of God's kingdom. So yeah, I'm a little nervous right now, as you can imagine. But I do want to say that this doesn't really concern what you just asked me, but many ministries accept donations, and you never know how your gifts are being used. But we accept your gifts and simply turn around and provide you with the booklets and the magazine and being on the air to help you be better informed and give you the truth concerning issues and a biblical view on the issues that align with all of those who walk and live in faith.
And one of the things that I was just thinking about in terms of outlook, we will have Kelly Shackelford with us a little bit tomorrow. Of course, we always have Penna Dexter, and those are individuals that are writing as well. The January issue, which I mentioned on Friday, has an article by Kelly. Of course, oftentimes we have an issue by Penna Dexter. And if you say, well, I learned so much, well, I do too, because lots of times I'll be reading through our magazine because I sometimes don't get to see an advance copy, and I go, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, that's a good idea. And so all of us are learning together, and it seems to me that that's just another real benefit about this. We don't claim that we have all the answers, but we try to bring in the best guests, the most articulate individuals. We give you commentaries. I think many people appreciate the fact that I have a daily commentary today about the new economic paradigm, and one tomorrow relating to China about Plan Red. These are things that you will probably see nowhere else. And that's another thing, Jana, you've been talking about, is that as you've met these individuals, they say, I just don't know where else I'd get this information if it weren't for Point of View.
That is true. We hear that a lot. And listen, folks, we can't meet our budget without big gifts, and we are very appreciative of the people that can provide these big gifts. But let me encourage you to consider a monthly gift of just $30 or more. You're going to get the Outlook magazine. You're going to get the Biblical View books that come out every month. They're easy to read. You can read them in about 10 minutes. And again, you can feel better about standing up with your faith or in your faith with these issues. And $30 is just a dinner out, possibly foregoing a couple of fancy coffees during the month. But if you're saving up for something big, consider saving someone for Christ, because this really is the biggest gift. And we are able to reach out across this nation, and with these booklets and with the commentaries that come out and with being able to hear Kerby on the radio Monday through Friday and even on the weekends sometimes, people are going to be able to hear what they need to develop that seed inside them, to have that desire to seek God, seek His will. And that's what we need. We're striving to get in tune with the next generations coming up so that biblical culture is going to be established in the next few years, instead of looking back and saying, well, those were the good old days when we used to be godly people. No, we need to be raising godly people now.
And again, one of the other things I thought I just might mention is that you are in the Colorado Springs area and you drive by some of these very large ministries, and yet when you've come here, you recognize that we do a lot with a little, don't we?
Oh, we certainly do. All 10 of us. We don't have that big of a budget, and we are striving to hit that $300,000 mark by midnight on December 31st. And we are falling a little short. We are getting closer and closer to making our matching challenge. But we also have another matching challenge coming up behind that. Someone's calling in and saying, we are about to pledge a matching challenge of $5,000. So, folks, we've got these challenges on the table. We really want to take advantage of every dollar. So if you're listening to my voice right now, please stop what you're doing, call in, give the best gift that you can. And I know that, the holidays are expensive. You've been eating well, you've been shopping well. If you want to call in a pledge and say, I will write a check on the 1st, if we know that that pledge is coming in, it can go towards this matching challenge and be doubled.
Again, we live in a world of misinformation, and we certainly have a desire to try to give you trustworthy information. But also, there is a need, as we've talked about even with Alan West and now with Jana, that we are needing to really educate more people about a biblical worldview. Only about 4% of Americans, or about 9% of born-again Christians, have a biblical worldview. So there is a lot of work to do, and that's what we are dedicating to do. But let me just mention that if you go to the website, pointofview.net. There is a section there that simply says, Give the Gift of Truth. We have a matching challenge, which we still have some of that money available. Now, Jan has added the fact that there's some more maybe coming in. And so if you have been waiting to the last day, now it's last day and a half, really, is all we have left, then I would encourage you to make that phone call. It's 1-800-347-5151, or you can go to the website, pointofview.net, or of course you can also simply click on the emails that we've been sending out. And Jan, just before I let you go, again, our listeners, they can call you if they have other questions, and of course they can always ask you to pray for them, because you're quite willing to accept those prayer requests, aren't you?
Oh, I am. I really am. My direct number is 972-692-1350. And when I leave messages on answering machines or send an email or a note, I include my phone number. And I really want to encourage you to call me if you have a burden on your heart, if you have someone who is ill. We know that corporate prayer works, and let's get as many people praying for the situation as we stand in the gap for others that maybe can't pray for themselves or are struggling. But yes, please join us in prayer.
Let's take a break. And again, you can give us a call, 800-347-5151. Jana, thank you very much. We'll come back and talk about more in the news right after this.
Did you know that Christians account for 70% of all philanthropy in America? Let this be a reminder that your generosity matters. And it especially matters for Point of View listeners right now. In this chaotic and godless culture, Americans need a voice of biblical clarity. And when you support Point of View, you're keeping that voice of clarity on the air for generations to come. And by the way, any gift you give in December will be doubled. But there are only a few days left to take advantage of this special matching challenge. So please, give right now. Remember, your generosity matters. You can bring clarity to the current chaos with your donation today. Give online at pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net. Or you can call us toll-free at 1-800-347-5151. Again, that's pointofview.net. and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, let's, if we can, for just a few minutes, try to sort out as best as we can a debate, kind of an internal debate that's taking place, but it's one that I've started seeing so many people talking about that it's worth talking about here on Point of View. And it has to do with these visas, which are given to primarily individuals that have technical expertise and are used in large part by people in Silicon Valley and other places. They're called H-1B visas. I give you both a point and a counterpoint here. One, it is the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal with the title, "Trump is Right on H-1B Visas." And then I also give you one by Josh Hammer, "Immigration Moratorium Now," in which he disagrees. He does, I think, illustrate the fact that this debate is not over, as he says, the relatively easy issue of illegal immigration. I think everybody's in agreement on that. But over the more complex, and I might even say nuanced, issue of legal immigration. The issue is these visas are provided for individuals. A lot of those individuals come from India. And, of course, you can see part of the reason why this surfaced because of some comments that were made by Vivek Ramaswamy about the culture. I'll get to that in just a minute. But the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal basically said that Donald Trump is right to endorse the value of H-1B visas in a debate that is kind of put on one side Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, on the other side Steve Bannon, a lot of other individuals concerned about immigration. And also talks about the fact that he says, I've had H-1B visas on my properties. They're thinking maybe Donald Trump has confused H-1B visas with H-2B visas, which would be for workers and hotel properties, but that's not the case. But the issue is that, again, one of the arguments that candidate Donald Trump, now President-elect Donald Trump, made, even back in a podcast with Silicon Valley individuals, was anybody who graduates from a college, goes there for 2 years or 4 years, if you graduate or you get a doctorate degree from college, you should be able to stay in this country. In other words, we bring people here from other countries. They get a degree here, and they have the potential to really help America, and they should stay. The argument from the Wall Street Journal is, I think, relevant in the fact that the program is small. 85,000 individuals each year that have qualified for an H-1B visa, and they've always reached their quota. Some 30,000 employers actually are able to get an applicant through a lottery system. In other words, there are, if you want to really understand this, maybe more job opportunities than there are H-1B visas anyway. So that's the first thing to say. Maybe this is a little bit of a controversy that doesn't need to be quite so contentious. That's the argument on one side. Some critics, though, have also said that H-1B visas let companies pay U.S. workers less because they don't have to pay those visa holders as much. But at least on paper, the theory is they should be paid the prevailing wage or actual wage. And, of course, there have been some abuses, but their argument is that shouldn't be the reason for actually getting rid of the program. The reason for this controversy comes, of course, maybe not of course, because you may not have been watching all the Twitter posts, but from Vivek Ramaswamy, who has made the case that these are worthwhile because, if nothing else, it is due to the fact that we as Americans can't seem to produce enough individuals of the best quality and certainly the achievement in terms of engineering because of an American culture that doesn't encourage more performance. On the one hand, people have said, well, he's attacking American culture. but at the same time to at least defend part of the statement by Vivek Ramaswamy, who does sort of engage in hyperbole. Have you ever read the book, The Coddling of the American Mind, or just a few minutes ago talking with Alan West about participation trophies? Sometimes we aren't doing the best job sometimes of encourage people to be the best that they can be, or to actually pursue rigorous degrees in engineering, computer science, and the rest. So the argument that they were making is simply that we certainly should continue to keep these visas, even at a time when we want to begin to close down illegal immigration. And so Josh Hamner says the trouble with these individuals is they want to apply one set of principles to the border, but a different set of principles to individuals that come here, in many cases from India. And he says, if anything, if you really want to be part of the American First or America First or Make America Great constituencies, then we should certainly not allow so many individuals from other countries to come in and take jobs that Americans can receive. The argument that he makes is, again, one of those issues where I wish the two sides were talking to each other, because he gives a very arresting quote that comes from the podcaster for Blaze Media. That would be Daniel Horowitz. It's been a while since we've had him on the program, in which he pointed out that in recent decades, 71% of the jobs in Silicon Valley have gone to foreign workers, while 74% of American STEM graduates have failed to secure jobs in STEM fields. And so the argument that he's making there is because we've made it much easier for those individuals from other countries, primarily India, or sometimes from other countries, to take those jobs, is it's prevented American workers from getting those jobs. And so there, of course, are a couple of other issues that neither side seems to be talking about. One of those is simply the abundance of the number of people in, say, a country like India to actually be able to take those jobs. There was a very good article, or actually a book even, that came out called The Flattening of the World, The Flat World, in which the author made the case that when you have 1 billion plus people in India, if you just take the most educated, those who would be qualified, if you will, as a national merit scholar, you have the potential, not that they have national merit scholars in India per se, although I suspect some of them are actually qualifying when they come to this country. You have as many national merit scholars in India as you have students in America, because you have more than 1 billion people. So obviously, if we don't have a program that has some limits on it, yes, there are going to be a lot of qualified individuals that could come from India or other countries. I don't want to just pick on India. We can talk about the number of qualified individuals that come from Germany or the UK or France or a variety of other places who could take some of these jobs. So again, you have to be careful, I think, to recognize that you don't want to flood the market, which brings me back to the statistic we mentioned just a minute ago, that if it's capped at 85,000, it does seem to me that it might not be so disruptive, or if we conclude that it is, well, maybe we lower the cap down to 60,000, but certainly we can benefit from individuals with very good brain power who want to come to this country legally under these visa programs. So again, this is a good example where each side cites some relevant statistics. I'd love to get everybody in the same room, stop talking past each other and start talking to each other. But as one of the individuals who probably has thought about this a great deal, an individual that came from India, Dinesh D'Souza, pointed out, this is a great example of a debate taking place internally with Trump aficionados, if you will, MAGA people, America First people, that was not created by the mainstream media. And he says, if nothing else, it's an illustration of the way things need to go in the future, and no longer have the agenda being set by the New York Times or the Washington Post, but let individuals within the movement talk about some really important issues and really begin the discussion. So if you want to see both the pros and the cons of whether or not to keep the H-1B visas, which at the moment Donald Trump seems quite willing to do, or the argument that we need to have a moratorium not only on illegal immigration, but a moratorium on legal immigration. You have that article by Josh Hammer. I'm sure this won't be the only time we talk about it, but I want you to see once again that we're not afraid to cover some of these contentious, sometimes even somewhat controversial issues here on Point of View. And if you want to read both a point and counterpoint, those are the next two articles on our website at pointofview.net. Let's take a break. I have a lot more to cover. We'll try to squeeze some of it in the last segment right after this.
You're listening to Point of View.
your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes. Let me just mention that as program note, tomorrow we'll have Penna Dexter in studio, Kelly Shackelford in studio, and by phone, Gary Bauer. Should be a good way to end 2024. And again, if you would like to join with us in terms of reaching our goals, we encourage you to go to the website pointofview.net. There's a banner that says Give the Gift of Truth, a matching challenge, and looks like we're going to replenish some of that if indeed we're able to reach our goals. So let's again encourage you to give. But just before we run out of time, I did want to talk about the idea of the censorship industrial complex. That is something people have been talking about, and more importantly, it's one thing to talk about it. What are you going to do about it? So I thought I'd pull back the curtain a little bit and tell you a little bit about some of the plans that seem to be implemented by the Biden administration. You can find some of this in a very good piece by Caitlin Richardson, in which she talks about how Trump administration could help crush the censorship industry. And that is, there has been a real desire to deal with this issue. And even in a campaign video a couple of years ago, interestingly enough, Donald Trump talked about trying to shatter the left-wing censorship regime. And you're familiar with the fact that we've had for some time this desire to stop the kind of censorship that is taking place. And we do know now, because of the so-called Twitter files, that under the Biden administration, the White House staff made explicit requests for platforms to restrict COVID-19 restricted speech. Other agencies engaged in speech suppression, that would be the Centers for Disease Control, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and much more. And so one of the problems with all of that is the government cannot prevent you from having your free speech, but private entities sometimes can be recruited to do that. And this particular quote from Nicholas Berry, who is a legal counsel for America First, said private entities cannot be permitted to partner with the government to censor American speech. And so what is going to be done? Well, let's talk about a couple of these appointees, who I'm pretty sure most of the ones I'm going to mention will be confirmed. The first is Andrew Ferguson. He has been selected by Donald Trump as the new Federal Trade Commission chair, and he said in an interview recently that Trump can cut off some censorship outright by ordering officials to stop communicating with platforms and then ending government funding for entities participating in speech suppression. But he says also private censorship would likely move to new fronts, making it important for the FTC, that would be the Federal Trade Commission, to take some very important first steps. So that's what Andrew Ferguson of the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, has said. Let's go to another one. That would be Brendan Carr. He is the head, or will be the head, of the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC. He said in an interview recently that one of his top priorities would be to smash this censorship cartel. And again, there's some certain things that the FCC can do. So that's first of all the FTC. Then the second is the FCC. Then even when you talk about people that aren't in communications, I think there's some good news, and that would be the individual that Donald Trump has selected to head up the National Institute for Health, the NIH. That is Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, and he is the individual at Stanford University who actually was dealt with in some rather unsavory ways. He was the one that co-authored what was called the Great Barrington Declaration, which was a criticism of the COVID-19 lockdowns and responses, and of course found himself deplatformed or censored a few times. And then, of course, you have the nominee of the Department of Health and Human Services. You know who that is, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He might be controversial. We'll see if he gets confirmed. But again, he actually has a lawsuit right now against the Biden administration because of so-called First Amendment violations. And I'm not through, because you have a few others. Harmeet Dillon is the individual who is set to actually oversee the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, and she has worked with her firm, her law firm, in challenging the California Secretary of State's office in their coordination with Twitter to suppress speech as well. So you really have quite a number of individuals, and I just picked those few real quickly in the interest of time to illustrate that it's one thing to say, oh, it's really bad of all the censorship of free speech, and to wring our hands. It's quite another to have people in positions of authority that are going to bring about some kind of change. And that brings me to one other, I think, positive movement, and that comes from the Alliance Defending Freedom. The other day, of course, we had Lathan Watts on the program, and he is the Vice President for Public Affairs for ADF. We never got to this point, and in some respects, it's sort of outside of his purview, but ADF, that is the Alliance Defending Freedom, have launched a new Center for Free Speech, which is really aimed at targeting censorship entities and pointing to opportunities that might exist for individuals to prevent that censorship from taking place. So in some respects, not only do you have people on the inside that I believe most of those probably will be confirmed as nominees, but you also have organizations on the outside doing some work there as well. And so it does appear that this might actually be somewhat successful, and it's something I'm going to try to maybe cover in a future commentary, because a lot of people really do wonder whether or not that is something that is really going to take place. I also have a commentary coming out next week about all the people that have been debanked. And I think I mentioned this the other day that Mark Andreessen was on with Joe Rogan. And if you don't know Mark Andreessen, he's kind of a tech industry leader, also best known as the co-founder of Netscape. But he on Joe Rogan said that there were 30 tech company founders who had been debanked. It's one thing to limit your free speech. It's another to say, we're not even going to let the banks provide you services. And then for those of you that have been reading the memoir by Melania Trump, she points out that her longtime bank closed her account and also refused to open an account for her then teenage son, Barron, who was in high school at just the time. So you can see that this problem of censorship is getting to be a lot worse than we might have imagined. Some of that came from things like the Twitter files. Others have simply come from Freedom of Information Acts, and a few have just come from individuals that have been affected either directly or indirectly by some of that censorship. And it does seem to me that there's a new sheriff in town. There are new individuals that are going to be part of that cabinet. Maybe it's going to change something for the better. So if you have been a little bit discouraged about censorship of free speech, I think you have been wisely discouraged about some things that need to change, but maybe some change is on the offing. Just before I run out of time today, one last time before we go off the air, let me mention that we do still have a match on the table. It's a dollar for dollar match. Your $500 becomes $1,000, $1,000 becomes $2,000, and we still have match available. So I would encourage you to click on that button that says Give the Gift of Truth, or of course you can give us a call, and we would certainly welcome that phone call as well. Let me also encourage you to go to the website or even respond to the email, because all of it is available for you to click on and to make your gift. Just before we run out of time, let me also say thank you to Megan for engineering the program today. Karen, thank you for stepping in and being the producer today. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow on our last day of 2024 right here on Point of View.
Did you know that Christians account for 70% of all philanthropy in America? Let this be a reminder that your generosity matters, and it especially matters for Point of View listeners right now. In this chaotic and godless culture, Americans need a voice of biblical clarity. And when you support Point of View, you're keeping that voice of clarity on the air for generations to come. And by the way, any gift you give in December will be doubled, but there are only a few days left to take advantage of this special matching challenge. So please, give right now. Remember, your generosity matters. You can bring clarity to the current chaos with your donation today. Give online at pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net. Or you can call us toll free at 1-800-347-5151. Again, that's pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just wanted to tell you, too, how much I have appreciated Point of View over the years. I've always been taught that we take care of our own, and I feel like Point of View is one of our own because of the Christian worldview that you do promote. And so I have become a partner today, and I just want to thank you so much, and just God bless you for all that you do.
Listen, I wanted to make a quick comment. I'm a relatively new listener to the show, and I really kind of stumbled upon it more than anything because I'm doing some driving now that I wasn't in the past. And my comment really is, I think you guys and gals are more right on about the assessment of this country right now than anything I've heard. You know, I go home and I tell my wife, you've got to hear what they're talking about on the show. It's just so right on. And I tell my parents the same thing.
I'm 25 years old, and I started listening to Point of View about 4 years ago, and it has changed the way that I think and the way that I view the world around me.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.